In San Francisco, the war which had raged across the broad expanse of Pacific Ocean came to a formal end.
As we approach the peace table, let us be free of malice and hate, to the end that from here on, there shall be neither victors nor vanquished among us, but only equals in the partnership of peace.
After a decade, the war which had turned the Pacific Asiatic basin into a vast battleground was finally terminated. Just 20 years after Japan embarked on the road of aggression. But that peace was not all-encompassing. In Korea, at that same moment, American fighting men were battling a new aggressor. In the hills and valleys of that peninsula, the free nations were making a stand to keep that aggressor from overrunning all of Asia and the world. Asia in the 20th century seemed to the world beyond its shores just as unfathomable as it had for centuries past. The inscrutable East seemed far beyond the ken of the peoples of the Western world. The heritage of the people of the Asiatic Pacific lands has little in common with Western tradition. The culture of the peoples of Asia has remained virtually unchanged by the passage of centuries. And throughout Asia, life for millions of Asiatic peoples of differing racial stocks has very little from the life of their ancestors thousands of years ago. But though that life is essentially simple, life for the Asian has an infinite variety of facets. His values are often incomprehensible to an outsider. The overwhelming majority of Asians believe in a divine being. Whether Confucian, Taoist, Hindu, or Buddhist, the Asian feels a strong sense of oneness with his God, with the universe, and with the recurring cycle of time which makes his own lifespan a part of the main current of life throughout the centuries. One of the principal religions of Asia is Islam, practiced by millions of followers of the Prophet Muhammad. The Muslims' holy book, the Quran, repeats a single theme: there is no God but God. Like the Christians and Jews of the Western world, the Muslims believe that both God and the immortal soul of man have definite characteristics. Some 300 million people in Asia are Hindus. Their religion teaches that the individual recognizes only one element in man and nature, to which his attachment must be absolute, the supreme soul of the universe. For centuries, Hinduism relegated all its practitioners into separate castes. Those castes were completely rigid. The Hindu of whatever class was bound to his group. His day-to-day life followed the prescribed pattern of his caste. Though the observance of the caste system has been legally outlawed in the India of today, Hinduism itself still exerts a powerful influence over the life and thought of much of the Asian world. The basic problem of Asia lies in its tremendous population. The lives of millions of Asians are spent in abject misery. Throughout great areas of Asia, there is not enough food to sustain life for much of the population. In the enlightened 20th century, millions of Asia's people are homeless and starving. In many parts of that vast area of the Earth's surface, the most primitive methods of distributing vitally needed food are still employed. Throughout the centuries, Asia has not been able to feed its people. The land under cultivation produces a far smaller yield than it would if the farmers were to use more advanced methods and equipment. But in most of the countries of southern and eastern Asia, the farmer pursued his time-honored tasks in the same manner as his great-great-grandfather had before him. On the solution of that food problem rested the future of Asia and its relation with the Western world. In the atomic age, that development was an urgent necessity if southern and eastern Asia were to become a strong part of the free world. For the rice paddies of Asia were the setting for one of the principal showdown battles against the further advance of communism. In Indochina, French troops dug out communist guerrillas one by one in an exhausting war which continued month after month. Impressive advances were scored by French forces, and the area thoroughly scoured for communists. But usually the French troops would find the same area in need of cleaning out once more. More and more French troops were committed to the battle. Indochina's interior was one more raging battleground on which the fight against the communist aggressors was being waged under the most difficult circumstances. The Orient first exerted a strong appeal to American business interests more than 100 years ago. In the early years of the 20th century, American concern with the affairs of Asia grew to greater proportions. Along the coast of the Asian mainland, especially in China's large port cities, the stamp of American business was much in evidence. As the 20th century progressed, China's large population centers assumed even more of an Occidental cast. The westernization of China's principal cities had a marked influence on the lives of many of its people. And the presence of American business firms in the Orient directly affected some thousands who took an active part in the gradual process of conversion to modern methods. To protect all American interests in the Orient in the years preceding World War II, small detachments of U.S. Marines were stationed in cities like Shanghai, charged with the responsibility of keeping the U.S. out of any Asiatic squabbles, and yet never permitting any situation to develop in which the United States would lose face in Oriental eyes. The development of Asiatic countries has been a matter of increasing importance to the United States during the past few decades. Beginning in 1945, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, instituted a program to help countries like China face their critical problem in readjusting to 20th century methods of development. For more than 2 years, UNRWA shipments, largely from the United States, contributed materially to the gradual economic advancement of a number of Asian countries. Soon after UNRWA ceased to function in 1947, the U.S. Economic Cooperation Administration set about helping the job of rehabilitation on a somewhat more ambitious scale. Over a period of 45 months, Asian countries received almost $1 billion in ECA funds, with the largest part of that allocation going to China. The immediate aim of ECA help was to rescue war-ravaged lands from poverty, and at the same time promote goodwill and friendship with the U.S. among the peoples of those lands. But this concrete economic assistance did not prevent China's collapse. The country was overrun by the communists in 1949. The nationalist government moved to the island haven of Formosa. On that island sanctuary, the nationalists rebuilt their military forces toward the day when the China mainland might be liberated. U.S. Army officers instructed the Chinese soldiers in the use of the newest weapons and intensified training in all phases necessary in the achievement of an effective fighting force. The Chinese army on Formosa numbered some 500,000 men, but many of those needed instruction in the most elementary phases of warfare. Formosa itself benefited greatly by the recent developments. With a major assist from ECA, Formosa's power system, built during the years of Japanese occupation, was reconstructed and streamlined. Within a 2-year period, the U.S. spent more than $5 million on major improvements to Formosa's power system. The railroad lines were rebuilt as part of the program to integrate Formosa's economy. Some hundreds of thousands of dollars were allocated for use in the rehabilitation of Formosa's industry. But by far the most important contribution was made in the reorganization of the country's farm economy. Under the new land rent reform program, Formosan farmers could procure new contracts, whereby the rent to the landlord was limited to 37.5% of the crop instead of twice that amount. For Formosa's several million farmers, this change marked the end of a life of near starvation. The ECA also provided vitally needed fertilizer, which enriched the land and increased the size and quality of the farmers' crops. This unprecedented program of land rent reform and instruction in scientific farming was underwritten by the U.S. Joint Commission on Rural Reconstruction, working with ECA funds. It afforded Formosa's farmers for the first time a sense of security. On the 14,000 square mile island of Formosa, the first steps were taken toward a possible solution of the problem which was besetting all Asian lands. During the years following World War II, U.S. aid to the nations of Southern and Eastern Asia increased, with the emphasis placed more and more on military rather than on economic assistance. Hundreds of U.S. planes were delivered to Indochina and Thailand, concrete support for the defense of those countries against communist aggression. A parade through the streets of Saigon, Indochina's capital, was staged to impress the people. The U.S. also concentrated strongly on improving health conditions in the countries of Southern and Eastern Asia. For the prevention of disease and the introduction of modern medical facilities were, in a very real sense, just as important to a nation's recovery as economic or military aid. In the years following the end of World War II, American assistance of several types was bringing the United States closer to the personal lives of millions of Asians. That bond was a most important factor in the struggle to keep Asia from becoming a communist continent. But the most powerful contribution to that crusade was being made in Korea. On that peninsula, on the rim of the Asian mainland, the forces of the United Nations were taking their first positive joint action in resisting open aggression. A memorable forward step in the campaign to defend any nation attacked in any part of the globe. That campaign against the aggressor in Korea was a punishing one for thousands of American fighting men. The UN troops fought well against almost overwhelming opposition. But the outnumbered UN soldiers continued to attack. In beating back the enemy advances, United Nations forces suffered heavily. During the first year and a half of the Korean War, U.S. casualties totaled almost half the number of American casualties sustained during the 4 years of World War II in the Pacific. As usual, it was the men with the rifles who were hit hardest. With the backing of the peoples of many nations, the fight against the forces of slavery would be continued in the crusade for freedom in Asia and the Pacific and throughout the world. In the past 26 installments, Crusade in the Pacific has documented the history of the Pacific Asiatic world over a 20-year period. Today, that part of the world is a matter of greatest concern to the United States. For the future of the Pacific Asiatic world and the future of the United States are indissolubly linked. The peoples of that vast area are well aware of the urgent necessity for mutual understanding if a lasting peace is to be achieved. I would like to introduce Mr. Kentaro Buma of Japan. Would you tell us, Mr. Buma, what you consider to be the obstacles we must overcome to arrive at that closer understanding?
I think one of the strongest factors which has prevented that understanding for so many years is the great dissimilarity in our cultures. The Asian attitude towards life and what is most important thing in life is quite different from the Western. Oriental religions induce a fatalistic attitude towards what happens to the individual in the present. Man's spiritual life is of much more importance than his material well-being. The individual identifies himself much more closely with the stream of life throughout the ages. I think that recently, many Americans have come to understand Asian peoples a little better. I hope they realize that even though there are differences in our background, we should be able to arrive at a satisfactory relation of our points of view in our effort to create a better world for all peoples.
Mr. Pesek, what are the biggest problems facing Indonesia and the other Asian countries which became independent after World War II?
Americans must remember that Indonesia and young independent nations of Asia have jumped right from the horse and buggy age to the airplane age. The 20th century is moving in on the peoples of Asia with lightning speed. Changes which were made gradually in European countries over a span of centuries are being assimilated in Asian lands in a few short years. Changing our whole way of life virtually overnight is a difficult process. inevitably accompanied by a certain amount of growing pains. Americans should try to remember that in these days of our infancy as independent nations, we are faced with many overwhelming problems, many of which confronted the United States when it was a young republic.
And now I'd like to introduce Mirza Muzaffar Shikoh of Pakistan. Mr. Shikoh, do the peoples of Southern and Eastern Asia consider communism a menace?
Not the way the Americans do. The average Asian does not understand communism in its political sense. But many hungry people have been led to believe that communism may provide more food than they currently have. While it is true that a spiritual aspect of life is the most important for an Asian, he still thinks of the stomach. To many Asians, communism may be a danger, but it is a danger they have not yet experienced. And to some Asians, anything is preferable to that type of life which they experienced under the old colonial administrations. Communist propaganda in Southern and Eastern Asia has been very subtle indeed, and I should say very effective. The communists examine the situation existing in each country and take advantage of whatever discontent they find. American propaganda since World War II has been rather too broad and not attuned to the special problems of each country. I sincerely hope that a greater mutual understanding develops between the United States and our people before communism has a chance to engulf all of Asia.
Perhaps Mr. M.S. Dave of India will tell us what he thinks American policy in Asia should be.
The principal concern of the people of Asia today is national freedom and economic development. In the international chess game between the two great powers, the free nations of Asia would prefer not to be pawns. Our countries have much in common with the West, but our people would like to feel that they are making their choice freely without any outside pressure. There is much to be gained both by the East and the West if our people and the people of the United States develop that bond of friendship and mutual understanding.
That basis of a closer understanding requires the concerted efforts of the nations involved. Many Americans are aware of the problems which must be overcome in forging a strong bond between the East and the West. Men like John Foster Dulles, architect of the peace treaty with Japan.
Progress is being made, although the opposite sometimes seems to be the case. Today, the East and the West are approaching closer understanding. The old order of Western colonialism has died. Communists hope that its ghost will flutter to frighten the Asian peoples so that they will shrink away from the West. That, of course, would mean not Asia for the Asians, but Asia for the Russians. We in the United States feel a newborn sense of responsibility to help to dispel the fears that paralyze and divide the free peoples. In Japan, we have an illustration that we can cooperate on a basis of equality, even with former enemies of another race. We shall show, wherever opportunity offers, that the free West can join hands with the free East in equal fellowship to preserve our common freedom and our cultures and our civilizations. Thus, working together, we shall set an example which will stir the souls not only of the free, but of those who, now in captivity to despotism, still cherish love of freedom.
Go forward, men of courage, in the freedom fight. Let every tyrant feel your might. For freedom and justice, forward surge, relentlessly marching on. tyrant feel